Welcome to the seventh episode of the PlainGains podcast. Today, I'm going to be talking about how many days a week you should be training. And now, this is a question I get all the time from a bunch of individuals, and they're just seeking a one answer that's just you should train 5 days a week, and that's going to be the best. Now, this is a really bad answer because it doesn't take into consideration all of the nuance that comes with having different goals for different outcomes. Now, if any personal trainer or fitness person or educator gives you an answer that's not it depends or asks you more questions to try and figure out your goals, I'd be very wary of what they are telling you because that is going to be an extremely unnuanced response, and it's probably not going to be what's actually best for you. So let's kind of break this down and help you figure out how many days a week you should be training. So the first thing you need to do is determine what your goals are. So that is whether your goal is to maximize hypertrophy or maximize strength, and you have or whether your goal is to maximize a mixture of hypertrophy and strength, or maybe you want to maximize your longevity. And now I'm using maximize here to define get the best outcomes for, but if you're maximizing your outcomes for strength and hypertrophy at the same time, you're going to be sacrificing the total outcomes for either of those variables. Rather, you'll be maximizing the combination of those two variables. So what I mean by that is if you are training for both strength and hypertrophy, you may not get quite as strong or quite as big, but you will get the combination of both of those somewhere in the middle. Same goes for cardio and other sorts of things like that. So that's question number one. That is, what are your goals? Question number two is, what is your lifestyle like? How much time do you have available? Is the time that you have available chunked onto a couple of different days where you have a bunch of time, or maybe you have limited time on every single day, but you have time each day? So that could look like you have work only 4 days per week, and those other 3 days you have completely nothing. Or maybe you work for less hours, but you work 7 days a week, and so you have certain blocks of time each day that's going to be unique. Maybe that's your lunch break or whatever it may be, where you have the availability to train as much as you want. So these are all things that you should consider. Additionally, how mentally draining is any of those things that you have going on in your life? For example, if you have an extremely stressful job, you may not want to go train before or after that job because you're going to be sacrificing outcomes in your job. And so these are all questions that I would expect a personal trainer to be asking you when you're trying to determine the proper number of days a week you should be training. And so let's go into a couple of different examples, maybe some, I guess you might call it a case study, to figure out what you can do and what you can ask yourself to figure out how many days a week you should be training. So let's first take a look at a person who has unlimited time in the gym. Let's say they are just a regular high school student that doesn't play any sports at all, and all they are looking to do is maximize their hypertrophy. They don't care about their longevity at this point because they're still 16 years old. So for this person, I would say it's not a bad idea to train 6 days a week. One, that's going to be spending time productively, not getting into poor habits. That is, you're going to be improving your life through building muscle and getting healthier, perhaps even considering learning how to cook properly so you can get healthier nutrition habits. These are all things that you can consider. And now this person is also likely going to have high quality sleep, and they have the ability to have high quality nutrition, and that will allow them to recover easier. And now, what are the benefits that they are afforded by being able to train 6 days a week? Well, they could probably do more total weekly volume because their intra-session or their per session volume can be lower. And that's just because they have the ability to train more days a week. And so if you take a look at someone who can only train 4 days a week and do a comparison, they may only be able to handle doing 4 sets of side delts in a session. And so that would total to 8 sets. Whereas a person who's training 6 days a week might be able to handle 4 sets of side delts per session, but handle 3 sessions per week. So they'd be able to do 12 sets rather than just 8. So that's one way that that individual who has unlimited time might be able to maximize their hypertrophy. And now this doesn't always mean that more days per week is going to be better for your results. You have to take into consideration your own individual recoverability, how much volume you like to train with, how intense you're going to be training with, or how much intensity you're going to be training with. Now, this is going to be defined as how close you're training to failure. So if you're training to failure and beyond failure every single time, you're going to be able to do less volume, and you're going to have to do less volume because it's a lot more fatiguing than if you leave a couple of reps in reserve. And now you also have to take into consideration, if your goal is strength, that you may want to have some more reps in reserve so you can train more frequently, so you can improve your movement pattern, which is a huge factor in strength, which is why you see a lot of powerlifters doing bench press or squats more than twice a week. So that's definitely one option for that individual. And now if this individual likes to spend time with their families on the weekends, they could absolutely make amazing gains training 4 or 5 days a week. But if they have the availability to train 6 days a week and they really like training and they want to improve their life, I definitely don't see a problem with training 6 days per week. Now let's take a look at another person who is looking to kind of maximize their longevity, but they have limited time. So that means they can only really do one workout per week or one workout per day. And they have 2 hours, let's say, for their workouts in their days. So if we take a look at this person, in order to maximize our longevity, we're going to have to incorporate both some resistance training and some cardiovascular training. There's a ton of research on this. If you have any questions, I can definitely drop some studies below, but I'm not going to go ahead and recite authors like Eric Helms. I just don't have it like that. Anyway, so if we're looking to get kind of the best of both worlds for longevity, it might be a good idea to think about how much the longevity matters, and not this to you specifically. Now, this usually falls on the spectrum. Usually cardio is looked at as more important than resistance training, but resistance training should not be neglected because it allows you to maintain your self-sustainability as you age due to decreases in risk of osteoporosis, etc., bone mineral loss, whatever. That's more important for women than men, but that's besides the point. So if you are more on the hypertrophy side, you might want to do more resistance training, less cardio, or if you're more on the longevity, then you might want to do more cardio and less resistance training. But I would not drop the resistance training to lower than 2 sessions per week. And now, so going back to what this person should do, I think a pretty good medium, at least what I would do if I was in this situation, would be to do 3 to 4 resistance training sessions per week and 3 to 4 cardio sessions per week. And now the cardio sessions, I would usually tail on the end of a resistance training session if I was doing 4 and 4. And if not, I would do the resistance training and cardio on separate days if I have the time available. And what that could look like is there's a variety of different resistance training splits you could have, and then you could do your cardio where you do 2 sessions of zone 2, 1 session of zone 5, or 2 sessions of zone 2, 2 sessions of zone 5. And there's a bunch of different options you have here, but that's definitely a good number of days per week to train. Now, this individual will definitely still be able to make excellent hypertrophy gains training only 3 or 4 times a week, while they are also able to make good cardiovascular gains, maintain their cardiovascular fitness, and potentially improve their VO2 max a little bit, or maybe even a lot, depending on where they are starting from. So moving on, we can take this same exact example and take it to the level of unlimited time. Now, if you have unlimited time, it might be beneficial to keep your resistance training at roughly 3 or 4, but add in more cardiovascular training sessions at lower intensities like zone 2, because typically zone 2 cardio is not quite as fatiguing. So you could probably get away with 5 or 6 zone 2 sessions per week with 1 zone 5 session while still doing 3 to 4 resistance training sessions per week, assuming you have unlimited time, your nutrition is on point, and your sleep is on point. Again, those are factors that you need to consider when you are considering how many days a week you can train. Also, your stress should probably be pretty low if you're going to be doing that, because high stress environments, again, will reduce your recoverability. So now let's talk about probably the majority of the people here, and that would be those seeking to maximize their hypertrophy with some sort of limited time, whether that's school or work or kids or whatever it may be. I think a majority of those individuals are probably going to fall somewhere in between 3 to 5 times per week training. And now there are plenty of different ways to set up programs to maximize your hypertrophy with each of those days per week. If you're training 3 days per week and you're a competitive bodybuilder that needs to put on a bunch of muscle, you're not super experienced like an Alberto Nunez, where the 3 days a week is targeting your weak points and still making great progress, you can do something that I think I've heard Mike Israetel talk about, where you put a lot of your muscle groups on maintenance volume and you prioritize one muscle group particularly, or one or two muscle groups particularly, for 8 to 12 weeks, and then you kind of switch that up. That's definitely one method. But alternatively, you could just train at lower volumes, high intensity, 3 times per week, get in and get out. You get in your hour and a half sessions, and you can make great gains. Now, are you going to make as many gains as someone who's training 6 days per week? Probably not, but who's to say? It kind of depends on your genetics and your individual variability, your training experience, and a lot of other factors. So again, if we are looking at someone that has limited time, I would try and train somewhere between 3 to 5 times per week. And now, if you're looking for an answer on the intensity with respect to how many days a week you're training, the less you are training, the more you're going to be able to recover from higher intensities. So if you're training only 3 times per week, and those three times per week are spread out, they're not all at one end of the week, like Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Let's say they're Monday, Wednesday, Saturday, or something like that, then you could probably get away with doing a little bit more volume and intensity per session as compared to someone who is doing 4, 5, or 6 days per week, because you have more time in between your sessions to recover. Okay, so then to summarize, basically what I said was, the less number of days per week you train, the harder you should probably be training in those sessions if you are looking to maximize your results. And again, that doesn't mean when you're training more days per week, you should not train hard, but it basically means that you have no excuse to not be training hard with lower days per week, assuming you are able to recover prior to your next session where you're going to be training that muscle group, which you should be able to do if you're getting adequate sleep and nutrition. Now, again, to summarize, for a majority of people who have some sort of time or life constraint, I think that 3 to 5 times per week is an excellent place to start when your goal is to maximize hypertrophy. And now, if you have time constraints and your goal is to maximize lifestyle and your health, then you should probably, again, stick to roughly 2 to 4 weight training sessions per week and 2 to 4 cardio sessions per week. And now these cardio sessions and weight training sessions can be paired together. Again, if your goal is primarily cardio, then you should do the cardio first. Whereas if your goal is primarily hypertrophy, then you should do the resistance training first. Somewhere along the lines of that would be a great starting place. Now, if your goal is to maximize strength, this is not something I typically talk about, but you will want to consider a couple of more variables. And now the reason why I didn't bring this up with hypertrophy training specifically is because we have ample research to show that frequency doesn't matter quite as much when we equate our volume. And now this is not to say that volume cannot be more when you have higher frequency. For example, some people might be able to tolerate more sets when they are training a muscle group more frequently, and that could potentially elicit more hypertrophy. But in general, you can get similar hypertrophy outcomes with matched volume regardless of your training frequency. So with strength, however, it is slightly different because a lot of strength comes down to your movement pattern and practicing that particular craft. It's kind of the practice makes perfect, because strength is a skill rather than necessarily building new physiological tissues. And now you are still developing physiological, I guess it's not really, we'll say physiological adaptations from strength training, and that comes from motor unit recruitment and recruiting motor units in a particular way to allow you to move the weight the most efficient way and allow you to move the most amount of weight. So there's definitely still physiological adaptations, but with strength, it is a skill. So you can improve your skill by practicing. And that's why we see a lot of times that your strength is better with higher frequencies. And this is definitely, there might be research supporting this, I'm not exactly sure, but you can definitely see this anecdotally where a lot of powerlifters are doing bench press, squat, or whatever exercise they may be doing at a higher frequency per week. Maybe that's 3 or 4 times per week. Now, this makes sense, and it also kind of makes sense why you would be doing your strength training at a lower RPE, because you're not going to be able to repeat your performance if you're training with such high intensity so frequently, because you're not going to be able to recover. But if you're training with a much lower intensity, you'll be able to repeat your performance week after week after week, which will allow you to get better at your skill and improve your strength dramatically. So, to summarize, there is a lot of different ways you can set up your training program, and there are a lot of different number of days per week that you can train and maximize your outcomes with. But if a coach is just spitting out a number of days a week you should train without taking into consideration your goals, your lifestyle, the stress that you have, and your time constraints, then you should probably be wary of their recommendations, as that is a very unnuanced response and not something that is probably going to be best for your results. Again, if you're seeking to maximize hypertrophy with unlimited time, 6 days per week is probably a good option. If you have limited time, but your goal is still strictly hypertrophy, somewhere between 3 to 5 times per week when modulating your volume and intensity can definitely be a viable option to get excellent results. If your goal is to maximize your health, it's probably going to be a little bit more important to incorporate different types of cardio, whether that's zone 2 or zone 5, or somewhere zone 3 or 4, steady state, that's fine too, whatever you enjoy. And you can split that up into somewhere between 2 to 6 cardio sessions per week and 2 to 4 resistance training sessions per week, maybe even 5 if you're pushing more on the hypertrophy side of the goal. And again, if you are strength training, you can train anywhere between 2 to 6 times per week, and you might want to do a little bit lower RPE, so you can train with a higher frequency to improve your motor patterns on those particular exercises. And again, if you are looking for a coach can definitely help you out with picking the number of days that is going to be best for your schedule and your goals. And I would highly recommend getting a consultation if you don't want to go with the full month of coaching. I do offer consultations, and you can reach out to me on Instagram DM if you're interested in that. Or if you're interested in one-on-one coaching, I have a few slots available for the remainder of this year. So please reach out. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and the subscribe button and leave a comment or a rating on Spotify, as that really helps our channel grow. If you would like me to cover any particular topics, please feel free to comment below. I'd be happy to get to them in the future. Thanks again for watching. Peace out.